sort of, every day you're filing type thing. We have long periods of time to dig as deep as we want to go. Like I said, this project took 19 months. Series of stories that was just published a couple months ago, I spent 10 months on.
But Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong a little bit in answer to your question. So many of these stories were localized by the media who they distributed to, and so those media outlets, I presume, are the ones who are following in their own school districts.
Well, and that's one of the great things about the seismic story is that when we didn't just roll out, here's video, everybody, just air our stuff. Especially we had a great partnership with Patch and their 8,000 sites across California, where we gave them the data and the story like 2 weeks or a month in advance, and so that they had time to actually go out and do their own reporting off of that, localize the story, go to their own schools, question their local officials. I mean, how many 20,000 schools? A team of, even by the end we had 30 to 40 people working on it. You can't check all of that. So we utilize those partnerships to not just enhance or amplify how many people would get the reporting, but to actually move the story forward, tell a more localized story, advance the reporting in a way that we can't, as just one nonprofit in Berkeley, can do.
Some of what we as nonprofits do, we enable the traditional media to do more than they might be able to. We collect large databases and do the crunching, and then sometimes go to media partners and say, hey, look, we have this data and this is what it shows. You want to put a reporter on it rather than have us do the story? We've done that with KGTV, the UT, North County Times, and I think California Watch does the same thing. It enables the local media outlets to actually do some of the reporting where it's taken them 19 months to analyze data. They've acquired it, they've cleaned it up, they've analyzed it, and then they give it to you and let you do the work where you wouldn't otherwise have that capacity. So we've talked about the big, long investigation. We know you're probably going to have a lot of questions, and please feel free to ask us as we go through, but we're just going to start running through our PowerPoint basically to talk to you about how you can really do good watchdog reporting when you don't have 19 months or 10 months. Most of us who started out at smaller news organizations had to do our watchdog and investigative reporting around the demands of your media organization. Did you have a question back there?
Yeah, I did. Did you say it was 32,000 pages that you were going to expose?
For the seismic story,
yeah.
I think the reporter on that, Corey Johnson, I think he ultimately went over, reviewed more than 30,000 pages.
Okay. So here's a question. This is a session on watchdog reporting on a budget. And I didn't hear you talk about
Well, we're just getting started on that. On the how-to, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So.
Here's my question. You're going to do it in the tip. But what processes did you use to enable the vast public to participate in that process of analysis? What data systems did you use? Like computer programs did you develop to run through that data and deliver intelligence back to you? Those are the two questions.
We used the human program Corey Johnson, who hauled down our scanner in Sacramento and took over an office in the State Department or the State Architects Department and scanned himself all those pages and then read himself all of those pages.
That's
we didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't. I mean, I guess we could post all that and make it searchable and then and invite the public to do that. We posted a lot of documents that with the findings, but this was a very traditional. This was not.
And I think a lot of what your data wizards did at California Watch was Corey scanned in the PDFs and then they converted them to text, OCR, or did something.
No, it was actually the spreadsheets we had were different. Those were different data sets besides the records. We're not counting the spreadsheets. Yeah. Those are different data sets that documented different schools that didn't meet certain classifications for certain things. Those were massive sprawling too, and those had to be cleaned. We had one.
I was going to say, I think it was pretty
we had
stuff,
one staff person who spent months doing nothing but verifying that the buildings that were in this one data set were actually existed and were actually that just verified every single line.
I would add that on the website, if you look, they said this is to guide you, but you can't trust the information 100% complete because the state's
DSA's data was awful.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that was
the best
what
they could.
Initially, in the early reporting, it showed that DSA's records keeping was a nightmare. And so that's why we dedicated the resources we did to checking it. I don't think, I mean, there's a lot of amazing application ways that you can use the public to and just upload a data set and say, or a record set and say, hey everyone, go have at it. I don't think this was that story. These are dense, I mean, Corey Johnson became an expert on the science behind this. That you have to bring to reading the documents to know what they say. And so we didn't do that, and I'm sure we will though in the future on different stories. It's a matter of you have to decide going into a story, what's the best reporting tool for this, and there's going to be instances where just opening it up to everybody is the best tool. But I think they didn't make that decision on this, and I think that was probably the right decision.
Okay, well, we'll just start moving through some of our suggestions and tips for how you can do good watchdog reporting on a tight budget of time and money. A lot of these tips are incorporation. Some of them I'm giving a shout out here to an IRE member, Brent Wolf, who used to work for the Oregonian. He's like a super investigative reporter. Also, I'm going to do a plug for IRE. I don't know how many members are in here who belong to the Investigative Reporters and Editors group, but I highly recommend being a member of that group. They're a premier training organization, and their website is full of like great tip sheets for things. If you're a member, you can search the tip sheets, and reporters at IRE are notoriously great at sharing their wealth with other reporters. If you have a story you're working on say, seismic safety at schools or FEMA grants in the wake of a disaster, you can often just email a reporter who's done a really cool story on that, and they will help you. So IRE is a really great resource. I'm going to turn this over to Ryan to talk about approaching your beat with an investigative mindset.
Yeah. Well, like most people, when I started my career, I was on a daily beat. I was actually covering 3 beats in one at the Monitor in McAllen, Texas, which was a 50,000 circulation paper that had the staff of maybe a 10,000 circ paper. But so we were all doing lots of different things, and so within my first month there, I sort of stumbled on a whole bunch of school construction projects that were done very, very poorly, and they involved an architect that appeared to be under investigation by the FBI. So I started looking into this and found out that the architect was a nightmare. I mean, he'd failed the test to become a certified architect in Texas like 10 times. I mean, he'd been tied to all kinds of nefarious things. So this was, I'd gotten like 500 pages of records from the state architect's office in Texas, and so I had a great story here. So I go to my editors and say, I've got this great story here, there's all this digging I have to do. And they say, great, we can't let you off of anything. But can you get that in a month? Luckily they backed off the month thing, but I didn't back off the beat. And it took me 8 months, but by working my beat differently and approaching the story differently, I was able to actually get the story done. It takes longer, and it's more difficult because a lot of investigative reporting is in momentum. But it can be done, especially when you're trying to do your first or second project, or to prove to your superiors that, look, there's a reason to invest in me doing this more often and to giving me the time to do it. You got to change the mindset. You have to. I refer to most daily reporters as hunter-gatherers. You go out and try to tell the best story you can that day. You get everything that you have to have or can get for that one story, and then once you reach deadline or reach a point where it's like, okay, I've got enough for this story, you stop. And even on stories where you follow it over time, it's everything. Every day is sort of siloed off. At least maybe that was just me. But I found to do investigative work, you had to sort of also be thinking more along the line of an evolution from hunter-gatherer to farmer, where things you're doing today won't bear fruit today, or this week, or next month. But if you file a records request that has nothing to do with a daily story, just about something that's on your beat that you're curious about, or just for the sake of doing it, eventually, you'll start learning more way outside of what's just breaking news or what's on agendas, and more investigative stories in nature will be, sort of coming up. Try to at least 2 or 3 days a week talk to somebody who's not for a daily story. Interview somebody at an agency or an organization, or just dealing with something you cover that has nothing to do with producing for that day. You got to open up your circle. beyond just the regular, reporters get into a rut. You know, you go to the same sources on the same stories day after day, and you miss what's actually going on. A story I'm working on right now, there's been, different parts of it have been covered, for 10 years, but the main heart of the story has been totally missed, and it's horrific, but it's because daily stories don't always answer the bigger questions, and reporters don't remember to keep asking them beyond that day's deadline.